Hello curious history lovers, we're in Kew. Now we've just walked through the Victoria Gate, we're approaching the Palm House. This glass house was built between 1844 and 1888 and was a collaboration between an iron worker named Richard Turner and a very popular architect of the 19th century named Decimus Burton. Burton, his name is synonymous with London. He worked on the gate at Hyde Park Corner, the Wellington Arch at the top of Oxford Street, the front forecourt of Buckingham Palace, parts of Green Park, St James's Park, Regent's Park. Also designed the seaside towns of St Leonards-on-Sea, Folkestone and Royal Tunbridge Wells. He was used to working with stone, and iron is a very different prospect. So a man named Richard Turner joined him to create this Palm House. Turner was a Dubliner, is often seen as the best glasshouse designer of the Victorian era. The idea was to create a curved, heated glasshouse. So Turner and Burton borrowed techniques used in the shipbuilding industry, which is why the Palm House looks like the large bottom or hull of a ship, simply turned upside down. It would be helpful to point out the temperature inside here. It's about 27 degrees centigrade, around 80 Fahrenheit, so it's warm. The vents and the windows are opened when it gets about 82 Fahrenheit, 28 Celsius, just for the well-being of the staff and the visitors. The steam is pumped in regularly, just to keep the area as humid as possible. In effect, we're inside a big glass and steel rainforest, or that's where the plants here are seen in nature. Every year, Kew Gardens hosts a Christmas lights festival. It closes at about 4 o'clock at dusk, and then people are allowed in to walk through Kew with the lights surrounding the trees, the plants, and the glass houses in the gardens. There are a few ways of doing this tour. Of course, I could have done this live, but it would seem impossible. Kew Gardens as a site is over 300 acres. Whenever I visited here, I come for about 4 or 5 hours, and you only ever scratch the surface. And to be honest, the signal only works best in the shops and the toilets, and that wouldn't make for a great tour. So I was filming for almost 2 days here, 2.5, and then edit, condense it down, and dissolve between the sections, so we all still get the sense of walking together, and then do lots and lots of research. This is the Hive, an installation and a sensory experience at Kew. They have a few of these installations and sculptures. Most stay only for a few months or change each year, but this one is permanent, as it actually took a lot of work to install it. What it's here for is to highlight the massive importance of pollination in the food chain. Some plants, well, they can self-pollinate, some do it by the weather, especially the wind, but the majority of plants can't pollinate without some kind of help, and this installation gives us a sense of that. A plant's male sex organs have to be transferred to the female, from anther to stigma, and about 300,000 different species of invertebrates, i.e. no backbone, and more than 2,000 vertebrates, including different species of birds, mammals and reptiles, help to do it. And so at the very basic level, that puts a lot of food on our plate. But it also puts medicine into our bodies, and even down to colour into our clothing. 70% of plants rely on animals and insects, and 30% of all of those plants just wouldn't reproduce and grow if we didn't have bees. So apples, almonds, melons, pears, cranberries, the squash family, many others simply would not exist without bees. This installation was created by an artist named Wolfgang Buttress. It was originally part of an exhibition in Milan, but now it's found its home here since 2015. And it's supposed to give a sensation, a feeling of living in a hive. It's 17 meters high. It has over 170,000 aluminium or aluminum parts. It actually weighs about 4 tons, and every shape is a hexagon, which is the only shape that bees create. In geometry terms, it uses the least amount of material possible to hold the most weight, and that's been proved in architecture. The foundations of buildings across the world use hexagons, and bees worked it out first. Although it's day, it also has 1,000 flickering lights, and it's actually connected to one of the hives at Kew. When the bees connect or brush past each other in those hives, the lights flicker, and also you may be able to hear the drone noise. Every note a bee makes is in the key of C. To show how important these little fellas are, let's imagine a blueberry field and the southeastern honeybee. One single female bee, in a few short weeks as an adult, visits about 50,000 blueberry flowers. That results in about 6,000 blueberries, with a basic market rate for the farmer of $75. So each bee is potentially worth $75. And this is the Maran North Gallery, which celebrates the work of the intrepid Victorian artist Maran North, who had an incredible passion for nature, which is pretty obvious as soon as you enter the gallery. She was born in 1830 into a very well-connected and wealthy family, but she made it her mission not just to enjoy that wealth, but to travel the world and paint as many plants and places as she could in incredible detail. In the late 1800s, she gave her work to Kew. She travelled alone, very unusual and extremely brave at the time. Her first journey was to America, later to India, then the Seychelles, South Africa, Japan, Australia and Chile. Most people at the time were not able to travel the world. Marianne's paintings offered a very rare glimpse into the world of exotic plants. It's a rare example of a Victorian style of hang. It's known as a salon style. Each painting is very closely placed next to its neighbouring pictures, with no gaps in between. It's quite overpowering, but very, very evocative. Her plan originally was to make visitors welcome to the gallery and offer tea, coffee, maybe a biscuit. But the director, Sir Joseph Hooker, decided against it. So her reasoning was to incorporate images of tea and coffee plants into the decorative motifs around the doorways in the gallery. And as tradition goes, botanical art illustrations present a portrait of a plant normally against a plain white background. Marianne's were different. She worked in the medium of oil, which allowed her paintings to become much more vibrantly coloured and also include the backgrounds. She discovered new plants to science. One of these was the Nepenthes northania, which she discovered in Borneo. This is the Princess of Wales Conservatory, a very clever ornate structure which opened in 1985 and officially by the Princess of Wales in 1987. But it's named after Princess Augusta, the Princess of Wales, who was the first royal patron of Kew in the 1700s. It's 5,500 square yards. It's got 10 different climate zones, mainly tropical, all computer controlled. And it's a conservatory, different to a greenhouse or glasshouse. It's for people and plants. Every year, Kew hosts an orchid event. Some of the rarest and most valuable orchids in the world are displayed here, and the security has to be tight. And what we see in front of us is a celebration of the biodiversity of Cameroon. Biopiracy has been on the increase ever since places like Kew and all the other botanical gardens in the world opened. Some of the plants are worth a fortune. The rewards can be hundreds of thousands, and the chances of getting caught, let alone fined or imprisoned, well, it seems to be worth the risk. On the 9th of January 2014, the manager of the conservatory, Nick Johnson, walked in here. The theme for the Orchid Festival that year was plant hunters, and they had made a section look like a campsite where Victorian collectors and scientists had pitched up their helmets, baskets, sandals. It's all been installed, and Nick bumped into Duncan, an apprentice. He had been doing his morning checks. He went to count the 24 water lilies on display, and there were 23, and a hole and some finger marks in the mud where the 24th had been. It was called the Nymphaea thermorum, the smallest and rarest water lily in the world. It hadn't been seen in the wild since 2008, and it only grew in one place, a hot spring in Rwanda. The only other place in the world was here. It became a metropolitan police case. Kew had always tried, when rare species or seeds had been sold, to make sure the home countries where they originally grew to profit from it, to rebuild communities and habitats. But it brought up a discussion of what is plant theft and what is botany. All the original owners of Kew took plants from all over the world. They transported them back. So it is an interesting subject. But as one of the gardeners here said to me, if one plant is extinct, a whole species might follow. He said plants were like words and languages. If all the roses went, where would Shakespeare be? If all the water lilies disappeared, where would Monet be? There are numerous glass houses here at Kew. This is the Water Lily House, created in 1852. It's tiny in comparison to the other glass houses at Kew, and it houses aquatic plants, tropical fruit, ferns, papyrus, originally built to showcase this, the enormous Amazon water lily, known as the Victoria Amazonica, which in the 1800s would have seemed like the eighth wonder of the world. The pond spans about 11 yards. They use fish, and they use a harmless black food dye to stop algae growth and create better reflections. They're quite strong, and they can even hold a baby or a toddler on them. We're approaching our final stop at this tour, the Great Pagoda. Completed in 1762, the architect was again William Chambers, who designed many of the structures at Kew, and it was a gift to Princess Augusta, the founder. This would have had the best view of the gardens. It has 80 dragons, removed in 1784. There was a rumour going round that George IV had taken them to pay for his gambling debts, but the truth is, they're not golden at all. They were and are wooden. They had just rotted over the years. It's 10 stories, 50 metres, 163 feet. During the Second World War, munitions testers came here. The owners at Kew decided to help with the war effort by hollowing out the centre, so these guys could drop and test smoke bombs. Let me thank you for joining me on this tour. Do subscribe, follow, share, like and comment, and I'll see you very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.